Hello and welcome to Trying Times. My name's Carmen, and if you're new here, I'm giving you a big hug through this right now, okay? I really appreciate you being here, and we're basically friends now. So no pressure. But no, seriously, welcome to the show. If it's your first time listening or if you're returning, I just want to let you know I really appreciate you and your time, and I hope whenever you're listening to this, you're having a wonderful day, night, whatever it is. I hope it's going really, really good. So yeah, this episode, I'm going to be so honest, I have had the longest, I was about to say day, but week. This week's been something, I'll be honest. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's also not maybe the best thing. I'm being very vague, but you know when sometimes a lot of things just pile up and you're kind of like, what's even going on anymore? Where am I looking? What's going on? What do I do? What am I thinking right now? It's just so much all the time. That's what this week's been like. And it's been a little bit overwhelming to say the least, but I've tried to handle it to the best of my abilities and do things that I can to make myself feel a little bit better. So that's going to be kind of what this episode's about in a nutshell. The month of May, as you might know, the month that we are currently in, is better known as Mental Health Awareness Month. This is kind of something I really wanted to talk about during this time because I think it has a very heavy meaning and it's something very important, not only to myself, but to a lot of people around me and to a lot of people in general. So in the last episode, I talked a lot about something that helps me with my own mental health, and that was mindfulness. Since this episode is all about mental health awareness, it just felt right to mention that one too, in case you haven't checked it out, or in case you haven't really looked into the concept of mindfulness. I would heavily suggest listening to that if you feel like it or if you feel up for it. I talk about it very much in my own way of learning about it as well, and it definitely is not the only way to learn about it, but it is one of the many resources out there that you can look into if you find yourself interested. I wasn't too sure when this month was actually initially established or recognized as Mental Health Awareness Month until I looked it up and discovered that it was officially recognized as Mental Health Awareness Month all the way back in 1949 in the US. I believe in Canada this was fully established by 1951 by the Canadian Mental Health Association and was actually initially introduced as a week long as opposed to a month. I mean, that's kind of big, right? Sometimes I find myself in conversations with people that maybe aren't the most open to mental health as an aspect, if you will, or as a part of life. And that's fine. It's in the same breath, I think those that recognize it, that's also great. That's fine. Everybody has their own journey. I think sometimes looking at these sort of things and these sort of facts and looking back at history in this sense and seeing that it was finally recognized or actually established at a point in time to be recognized, actually, I don't know, it kind of makes me feel a little bit better. I think generally having awareness, but especially an awareness event that allows us to learn more and lock in on an important topic that can help to educate us in a way that we could be more aware or sympathetic or overall better off as humans is so, so important. So with that, I will say there are many important things to learn. I want to share some of the important things that I've learned throughout this time. And the first fact I'll just drop in here is that in any given year, 1 in 5 Canadians experience a mental illness, which, I mean, looking at numbers in this sense, it makes it feel quite common because it is quite common. It's something a lot of us experience. It's something a lot of us go through, but might not actually feel comfortable talking about because it can feel isolating and it can feel scary and it can feel daunting. But I think looking at it in this sense, I mean, imagine yourself. You're in a room with 10 people. Maybe you're feeling a little low in terms of your mental health. I mean, looking around the room with that statistic, you know that at least one other person in that room is going to feel the same as you, or at least be able to understand and sympathize, maybe in their own way, to the best of their own abilities. Or, you know, there's some form of connection there where somebody understands, and it's this moment of realization where, oh my God, I'm actually not alone. I think having those sort of numbers sometimes can kind of help. Maybe not always, but they can. Another fact I'll just drop in here is that mental and physical health are linked. So if you have a physical health condition, this actually increases your likelihood of experiencing a type of mental health disorder or condition, which I think sometimes people seem to gloss over. Maybe sometimes people don't consider enough. Maybe sometimes we're not sympathetic or empathic enough because it's something that if you're not going through, you might not be aware of it or it may not be on your radar. But it is something that is very, very common And I think a lot of people actually deal with that. And it's something that we should be putting more attention and intention into, especially with our interactions and how we show up in the world and how we interact with others. I think that could change so much. And I mean, overall, I've shared those two facts. There are a ton of varying facts about stigmas of all kinds in this retrospect too, specifically career or work related. There was one that actually stood out to me in particular in a study done by CAM. 75% of respondents said that they would be reluctant or even refuse to disclose a mental illness like depression to an employer or coworker. And I mean, that already in itself is very telling, and that says a lot. There's a lot of questions around that. I think there's a lot of different things to consider, but they included in the study what a few different reasons behind this reluctance could be. The first being that there is a stigma around mental health as a general consensus, and it's true. While you may meet a handful of people that are incredibly understanding and incredibly sympathetic and incredibly aware, you, on the other hand, will also meet a lot of people that are maybe not all of those things and are maybe not as open to understanding and learning. And that's just kind of the way it goes. Another thing here could be the desire to be treated like anyone else as opposed to being treated differently, which is very true. I think sometimes people don't know how to handle hearing about certain things, or maybe there's a lack of education or a lack of awareness on this, which I think is so much more of a reason why we should work to create less stigma around mental health. But that's a separate tangent at the moment. But I do think that this is a very valid reason. I mean, for me personally, if I was placed in the position of having to share about my own experiences or share about my own mental health in a workspace, I don't know that I would be the most open or, jumping for the chance to do that either, because it can be scary and you can be met with a lot of judgment and a lot of different opinions or perspectives, if you will. Okay, so there's that. And then the final reason behind this reluctance could be something similar to what I just said, really, of a fear of negative consequences, such as losing a job. So again, there are a handful of people that will understand and are aware. There are also people that aren't. There are also people on another part of a spectrum where they may feel that you could actually be, to some degree, a liability, or to some degree, maybe a problem, just because of the way that you might function in a business sense. And I don't agree with that whatsoever. I think that that's kind of bullshit, because I think anybody is capable of doing anything. And there are people that are going to be like, well, I'd rather not open up and expect this kind of person in this kind of workplace. For what reason? For what reason? There are varying factors. There are varying degrees of functioning. There are varying mental health disorders that exist out there, and they are incredibly common from what I've learned so far. So I think that that's something that, as easy as it is to say, should be accepted and should be, made aware of, and maybe we can be more educated on this sort of a subject. It kind of isn't, and it is where it's at. I think we're coming a long way, but at the same time, some people are going to always have their own opinions, and that is just the way that it is. But I find it interesting because at the end of the study, in turn of events, 76% of respondents stated that they themselves would be completely comfortable with and supportive of a colleague with a mental illness, which is so telling, and that says so much more than, we can wrap our heads around a lot of the time, because there's that fear of, 1, sometimes being perceived, 2, being judged, 3, being isolated. It's almost like a degree of different punishments, if you will, or varying degrees of punishment for simply existing in the world in a different way. A lot of people aren't choosing these things. These are things that we live with, and it can sometimes take away from our experience. Sometimes it can enrich our experience in different ways because we feel a lot more. There's a lot of different ways to look at it, and sometimes people are very aware of that and are very open and perceptive of that, and at other times people are just people. But I can certainly share in this instance that I would understand why that 75% that was initially mentioned would be reluctant to share, because again, not everybody is as open to being supportive or open-minded as they might let off, which can make things so uncertain and things kind of just hang in the balance. And it's scary. On the other hand, I really back the 76% of respondents who shared that they would be supportive of a colleague, because I feel like that just goes without explanation. You're a human who is choosing to coexist with other humans, and that's all it is. But there is very clearly a divide in this thought process or idea. And I think that's what makes this month and this level of awareness so much more important, which again is a big part of why I wanted to talk about this, because we could all use more education about it. And there's never any harm done from that. So that's what I wanted to do. Hopefully it panned out. Who knows? But I appreciate you listening. That episode's not done yet, but I appreciate you being here and listening thus far if you have. So I guess switching the gears up a little bit here. I have been pretty open in the sense, I think, on this podcast of my own mental health and my own struggles, or I guess, I don't want to say hacks, but maybe ways that I cope with them. And I don't want to sound like a parrot and repeat a lot of those. But I guess if you want me to sum it up very, very shortly, I will say I find for me something that helps whenever I can actually physically have my hands on something to do something. This is going to sound funny probably. Puzzles are great. I love puzzles. Sometimes all you need is something to focus on, really. And to just sit there and be able to really lock in on something. That helps. Working out, I talk about a lot. It sounds probably annoying at this point. I get it, but I genuinely do love working out. I find it to be really helpful. I find it to be really insightful. There's different forms of working out that can help with different things, I think. This year alone, I'm actually really excited to get back into running now that the snow is all gone, and I've been running more, so that's really great. I actually joined a running club. That's exciting too. I started doing yoga, which is fun. It's really challenging in its own way, but it's also very exciting. I also started kickboxing, so that's really cool, and I think is a really wonderful outlet for a lot of different things, anxiety being number one. But yeah, there's a lot of different forms. I would highly recommend trying out different things and seeing if something helps you feel better, because I think that that's great. Another thing I will say is I genuinely love creating. So whether that's working on this podcast or creating something in the form of video or baking or painting or writing, anything really, I think just expressing yourself in some shape or form is so important and can do wonders for the mind and the body. So there's that. There's so much more. But those are just some of the things that I will say help me stay at bay a little bit and feel a little bit better. So there's that. Moving this along, I like to end every single episode with a segment where I either talk to some entries from friends, which, by the way, if you would like to participate in an episode in the future where I share your answer, please feel free to visit the Trying Times Instagram page and check out the link in bio to click on the participation form, and you can answer something that I will probably share in an episode in the future. For this episode, I figured it would be a little bit better maybe to pull externally. And also, I don't really want to share anybody's experiences if they're not comfortable with those being shared. So I actually took to Reddit, as I always do, and I kind of love it. But someone started a thread on Reddit asking what the importance of mental health awareness is. And honestly, it stated so many well said and impactful points. So I thought I'd go through this with you and just go over some of this too. Their initial post is quite long and it tackles some interesting points. Their general question is, what is the importance of mental health awareness? And beneath this question, they include some general information and then some headers and sections. It's genuinely such a long post, but I think it's great. They include a section on reducing stigma, early intervention and treatment, improved overall health, productivity and workplace well-being, stronger communities, suicide prevention, resilience and coping skills, as well as policy and advocacy, which again, these are all really important things in this instance because I think community was one that was already mentioned. I think all these things help live a lot better and help exist a lot better, or help individuals to live and exist a lot better, is how I meant to put that. One of the very first points, like I said, is to reduce stigma, which I believe is one of the most important parts, as I kind of mentioned earlier, because it still exists, and it still exists pretty hard, and makes this all the more difficult to just be, and to learn how to just be and exist in our own spaces, because sometimes it can feel incorrect. Sometimes it can feel overwhelming or it can feel scary, and it just is the way it is. And it's hard. It's hard as it is, and then I think something like stigma makes it a lot worse when it doesn't need to be, quite frankly. So there's that. Another aspect is overall health and treatment. Having this awareness plays a vital role in digesting and learning about different conditions, thus allowing us to learn to go about our lives. So again, I think that having that education is incredibly important. There are more points, like I mentioned, but I'll just stick to highlighting only 2 more. One being resilience and coping skills, which just kind of goes off of what I was talking about of, working alongside overall health and treatment, but also learning more about yourself in that aspect of what helps and what's positive versus what might not be. And the very last one that I want to strongly highlight is the idea of building stronger communities, which I think is so vital because community is essentially, I think, a core pillar behind so many different things and the reason why we function the way we do. And genuinely, as humans, we have a select few needs, I would say. But one of the most important ones is definitely the idea of belonging and the feeling of community. Without interaction and without having that, things can feel quite bleak and they can also feel quite meaningless. So that's something that I think is absolutely at the top of the list there. And it is so important. It's not something to be taken very lightly. It is incredibly important. And I can see why they included it in that. So I'll be honest, there weren't necessarily very many answers on this post, but the post in itself and the way it was formatted was really nice. And I just wanted to highlight it because I thought it was a great example of all the different components of mental health awareness that I think are worth knowing and learning about and continuing to educate ourselves about. There's so much out there and I think there's not enough time to learn, but we can certainly find time to learn. And it's good to know these things because not only does it help ourselves, but it helps those around us and people from other places too. So again, we're all just one big community. And I think that learning these things and understanding and having that sympathy and building that empathy is of the utmost importance. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. I really appreciate you, and I hope whatever's going on, however your life is going at this very moment, it's good. And if it's not so good, I hope that things start to look up or that something really good happens for you in the next couple days. But yeah, I'll leave it on that note and just sit with that, I guess. If you want to reach out and talk at all, please feel free to reach out through Instagram at the Trying Times Podcast. I would love to chat with you. Again, if you want to be featured in a future episode, please feel free to visit Instagram's link in bio and click on the submission form link. You can fill out one of those prompts either with an audio clip if you want, send in a video if you want, or just submit some text, and I'd be more than happy to share anything or all of the above. I appreciate you so much. So thank you for being here. That's it for today, and we'll chat again soon, okay? Bye.